And then again, I wanted to just say overall, this was a great experience for me. I definitely had the realization at the time that I could actually enjoy flying. And you can see here, I'll show you my scores. It went from my PICSM score of 44, 0 flight hours, AFL-QT of pilot of 84, and overall my PICSM increased to 67 with 10.4 hours, which included 2.5 hours of sim time. And then my AFL-QT pilot increased to 99, and that's really the biggest impact, going from 84 to 99. Obviously increased my PICSM score, but showing that 99th percentile. The PICSM 67, I was one of the lowest scores that was selected as pilot for the PICSM, but AFL-QT pilot 99 is the highest you can go, so I was well above average on that score.
Welcome to Lead From Within, a podcast of one airman reflecting on his time as an aircraft maintenance officer as he gets ready to transition to the pilot community. Here, we take a hard look at what works in the maintenance career field and what areas are sorely in need of improvement. We take a critical approach on what makes a good leader and manager and provide key takeaways for those interested in improving. The views expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government.
What is up, team, and welcome back to Lead From Within. For those of you just joining us because this is an episode about the rated career path, welcome. You're a nerd, but welcome. I'm your host, Justin Jasm Hillstrom, and today we're talking about the Rated Prep Program, formerly known as the Pilot Prep Program. Now, this is something I really care to share with you guys because this is actually how I became competitive to apply for the pilot program, and more importantly, this program is actually what made me realize that I now enjoy flying. And I know in previous episodes I told you I didn't really like it at the academy, but this program is actually what convinced me that I could be a good candidate for an Air Force pilot. So let's get into it. I want to start out first by going over this press release. It says the Rated Preparatory program now accepting applicants for the fiscal year 21 fall class. Active duty officers and now enlisted, and this is only the second class that allows enlisted, so a big step for our officer accession for pilot career field. We have until the 25th of May 2021 this year to apply for the fall 2021 Rated Prep program that is scheduled to be held around September 11th through the 25th. And if it's like the year I went through, it's basically 2 separate classes, 1 week each. Now, the Rated Prep program provides qualified airmen interested in cross-training to an Air Force rated career field an opportunity to gain and strengthen their basic aviation skills. And basically, this course consists of a ground course that they're going to send you online. So it's as if you were going to get your private pilot's license. You go and you take a online ground school, and that was probably one of the most useful tools, and we'll get into that a little bit later, on how I became a more competitive pilot candidate. And then you go to an in-person out in Columbus, Indiana, and you fly with the Civil Air Patrol for about a week. About 1 to 2 sorties a day, right, ranging between 7 to 10 hours total for you. And basically it's one sortie you're flying, then the other sortie you're observing a different student. It says they recently completed the 3rd iteration of the Rated Prep program with 40 officers and 20 enlisted personnel in attendance, which is huge. The enlisted personnel in this program marks a significant milestone and it helps cast a wide net to attract the best Air Force has to offer, and it's another step towards expanding the program. We plan to continue to grow in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, ultimately peaking at 240 students a year. And that is a huge goal, and I'm really glad to go into this. And when we talked about the diversity news program, we talked about barriers to entry, and one of the barriers to entry could be your recruiter lied to you and said being enlisted was the best way to get to be a pilot. All sorts of different horror stories that you hear. It could be you didn't have enough money to get flight hours, and that's kind of what this is getting after. And whenever we get into the application, you'll see that the Air Force is starting to focus more on barriers to entry whenever they look at candidates for this program now. One of the caveats for the program, and it's not really a caveat, but the closest word I can think of is officers who complete the program are required to apply for the next available Undergraduate Flight Training board, and enlisted participants are required to apply to at least one of the 3 Air Force commissioning sources, which is the Air Force Academy Reserve Officer Training Corps, ROTC, or the Officer Training School, OTS. And it refers interested applicants to go look at the PSDM on MyPERS if you're not familiar with those. probably not in the Air Force yet, so this might not apply to you, but I will have the link for that down below. Just know that you do have to have a CAC-enabled computer to get to this website. And the PSDM itself is for official use only, so I won't be going over a lot of the details, but basically some of the things I did want to hit. The background I really liked in here, so it shows, while exploring improved methods of selection and developing a diverse group of rated officers, the Air Crew Task Force developed the Pilot Preparatory program. The program allowed the Air Crew Task Force to evaluate the impact of ground school and 7 to 9 hours of flight time on Undergraduate Flying Training Board scores, which includes the Test of Basic Aviation Skills and Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, the AFOQT. In the program's first year, 37 officers who graduated PPP were selected to a rated career field through the UFT board. Following the success of the PPP, which I was part of the inaugural class, the Aircrew Task Force rebranded the program in fiscal year 20 as the Rated Prep program, realizing that a lot of the candidates selected from the Pilot Prep program actually weren't selected into the pilot career field, so it's kind of a misnomer. They wanted to emphasize its intent to increase diversity in all rated career paths, which I mentioned: pilot, combat systems officer, air battle manager, and RPA pilot. In fiscal year 21, RPP is also being offered to enlisted airmen who seek to become part of the Air Force's Rated Officer Corps. And that's, like I said, a really big improvement to the program for this year. So eligibility, they're planning to select up to 60 candidates for the fall class. It's open to regular Air Force officer and enlisted personnel only. So unfortunately, Guard or Reserve candidates are not eligible. It also says that Space Force Guardians are not eligible to apply. However, if you're an Air Force personnel that has not transferred to the Space Force yet, and even if you're working for a Space Force unit, you are still eligible to apply. Also note that if you've previously attended the Pilot Prep program or the Rated Prep program, you are no longer eligible to apply for this round. Key dates: the application is due by the 25th of May. I think I've mentioned that already. And the selection board will meet in early June for you to go and attend for those 1 of 2 weeks in September. Program requirements: you must review all assigned material before you come, so that includes the ground school and anything the Civil Air Patrol has you study on the way. You must retake the AFOQT and the TBAS at the first available opportunity upon completing of the RPP. And obviously this is part of their experience to see how big of a change they can impact in your overall pilot candidate selection method score. And I'll show you in a little bit, this actually had a huge impact on my score, going from not even going to be eligible for pilot because my scores were so low to just barely meeting the minimums on the overall score, but having a competitive package overall, so to speak. There are quite a few more details on the PSDM, so make sure you're checking that out. Again, it's FOUO, so I don't want to go over a lot of the details. It's nothing secret, but it is something that they wanted only for official use. As we review the package, you can see here, it's basically all just your personal data, who you're assigned to, what rated career fields you're interested in pursuing, and in what order you're interested in that. It talks a little bit about your academic background and your fitness data, basically just making sure that you don't have any negative indicators that we'll have to worry about in the future. And then it gives you a place to put in your AFOQT data and your TBAS date and your overall PIXM score, because you never know your actual Test of Basic Aviation Skills score. It just goes into the PIXM, the Pilot Candidate Selection Method score. And asks you a little bit about your civilian and military flying experience, if you've done any flying training while in the military. And then for enlisted only, it talks about what commissioning sources you anticipate applying for. Again, you have to do at least one of the 3, but you are able to do all 3 of them, I believe. And then asks about your demographic data, so your gender, what you identify as, and your national origin. And then how it changed as I went through, and I'll show you my package in a second, so to speak. It talks about why you are interested in the program and include comments about your aspirations to be a rated officer, where your exposure to flying began, and any barriers that may have prevented you from pursuing or obtaining a rated AFSC in the past. And again, this is part of their overall Aircrew Task Force and their diversity program to see, okay, what have we been doing that has kept people out? And I think it's really important that we are honest with ourselves and put in good details here so that we can continue to understand what barriers might exist, so the Air Force can continue to improve on removing those barriers, so we have a better and more diverse selection pool. The last gives you a space for the commander's comments. Asks them to provide a very detailed recommendation, elaborate on the airmanship of the candidate and the candidate's ability to excel if selected to become a rated officer. Now it says, talk about the airmanship, and if you haven't done any flying or anything in the past, the commander can't talk about airmanship in that way, so it's important to say how you're going to be a good pilot without any experience, and how this program is going to help you become a good pilot or whatever in the rated career fields. Now I want to go ahead and walk you through what my application looked like, and it has changed a little bit. You can see at the top it still shows what the requirements are, and you have to agree to it. I went through much of the same background information for experience, and the score, you can see it doesn't have that much about the demographics and doesn't ask me for some of the barriers to entry. It does have a place for my PICSM score and my AFOQT score. And as you can see here, my PICSM score starting out before this program was only a 44, with my AFOQT pilot score only an 84. And you'll also notice that it only asks for the pilot score on my application, whereas in this year's, it asks you for all of your scores because it's not just for the pilot selection anymore. And then it does ask for comments. Again, it is different. So, it does ask about barriers. Oh, who knew? I didn't even know it asked for me for barriers at that time. So the big thing here is don't just talk about how this program is going to help you or how becoming a pilot is going to help you, but how you are going to help the Air Force, how you're going to be a good asset to the Air Force. And I'm not going to talk about mine too specifically. If you do want to, you can go back and watch my video about why I left the maintenance career field. But basically, I had wanted to be a combat rescue officer, wasn't able to do it, but then I realized that I could still do the rescue mission without being a crew. And I believed that the pilot career field could help me still fulfill that rescue mission. And I thought my unique perspective as a previous maintenance officer and my drive to become a rescue officer and my passion for that rescue mission was going to make me a uniquely qualified candidate for a pilot, regardless of my scores. And then for the commander's comments, he just wanted to put in there how competitive I was. So it had my current strats for my most recent OPR, a little bit about me on how I lead, how I understand the rated career fields already coming from the maintenance career field. And then just a couple of unique details about me, how I can learn quickly, how I'm able to communicate with him as my commander, and how I'm able to communicate my vision to my team, how that would translate into a rated career path, since he, being the pilot, knows a lot better about how those skills would translate. And then just mentioning that I was a aircraft maintenance and munitions officer school graduate, so a maintenance patch, and how that experience with the test community as well would help me be a good pilot candidate. Then included to the PSDM as well is a typical syllabus, and you can see that you have to do the online ground school before you come, as well as you should receive a package in the mail with like the Cessna 182 information manual, a couple of aircraft flying handbook and pilot handbook for aeronautical knowledge, a couple other FAA things. I'm going to be a meet and greet, and then basically just goes into, hey, today we're going to discuss this topic, and then we're going to go fly these things, once as an observer and once as the pilot yourself. And I'll put in some videos here about what that looked like for me. This is a video, I believe, of me taking off in the 182, one of my earlier flights, because that's when we were so excited about recording and not trying to learn as much, so it was quite a bit fun. They'll send you your information about how to register for ground school, and again, this was awesome because it was free, and I don't have access to that school anymore because it's been such a long time, but I was able to save my notes from it, and you can see here just a couple. So from the Gleam Online Ground School, has some airplanes and aerodynamic information, and then it goes through some airports, air traffic control, and airspace information. And these notes actually helped me out tremendously when I was going to IFT, and then when I was going to UPT, when we're going through an academic portion, I could get a quick review of how I learned them here and how I was able to learn them here, so I remembered them when I was at IFT instead of trying to relearn them. And then again, I wanted to just say overall, this was a great experience for me. I definitely had the realization at the time that I could actually enjoy flying, and I know this isn't the perfect translation to military flying, and it's a little bit different. It's not entirely civilian flying, it's kind of a hybrid of the two, but it was the first time I realized that I could enjoy flying because it's something I hadn't done in the past. And you can see here, I'll show you my scores. I went from my PICSM score of 44, 0 flight hours, AFL-QT of pilot of 84, and overall my PICSM increased to 67 with 10.4 hours, which included 2.5 hours of sim time, and I actually got quite a bit more sim time than that. And then my FOQT pilot increased to 99, and that's really the biggest impact, going from 84 to 99. Obviously increased my PICSM score, but showing that 99th percentile. The PICSM 67, I was actually on the lower end, and we'll talk about that in the next episode whenever I'm talking about the U of T application process. I was one of the lowest scores that was selected as pilot for the PICSM, but FOQT pilot, 99 is the highest you can go, so I was well above average on that score. Note that one of the pieces of feedback I did put in there was my 10.4 flight hours overall, including the 2.5 of flight time, was only 0.1 hours away from another 5-point increase in my PICSM score, so that would have increased me from a 67 to a 72. So I did request that the Civil Air Patrol targets that each candidate gets 8 hours in the plane, and then add that with their 2.5 hours of simulator time to get them 10.5 overall. That would make us the most highly qualified and most competitive candidates leaving this program. So that's what I have for today. I'll put whatever files I can over in my Facebook page, so make sure you follow me over there. The link will be down in the description below. As well, make sure you give me a thumbs up if you found this information useful, and follow if you're interested in learning about the Undergraduate Flight Training Board process, because that will be a episode shortly following this. As always, I will leave you with my 6 idioms of life and leadership. Don't suck, don't be a dick, do your fucking job. There are no bad teams, only bad leaders. Establish dominance. No amount of success can compensate for failure at home. Thanks guys, take care.
Thank you for listening to Lead From Within. The views expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. Air Force, Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. Mention of any specific commercial products, process, or service by trade name, trademark, manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute or imply its endorsement, recommendation, or favoring by the United States government. The views and opinions of the authors expressed herein do not state or reflect those of the United States government and shall not be used for advertising or product endorsement purposes. Licensing and attribution of the music played in the podcast can be found in the show's description. Mike for Kobe.